Welcome to the City of Bakersfield Planning Commission meeting. This television broadcast is brought to you by the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission meets on the first and third Thursdays of each month. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. You can download the agenda for this meeting at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over this evening's meeting, Chair Richard Schwartz.
It is my pleasure to call. Okay. It is my pleasure to call to order the June 15, 2017 Planning Commission meeting. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Schwartz?
Here.
Commissioner Lomas?
Here.
Commissioner Bell?
Here.
Commissioner Cater?
Here.
Commissioner Rednick?
Here.
Commissioner Strong? Commissioner Wade?
Okay. Well, let's please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Thank you for attending tonight's Planning Commission meeting. The Commission provides an opportunity for public participation in the development process throughout the City of Bakersfield. Thank you. The Planning Commission considers a wide variety of projects, including subdivision maps, zone changes, general plan amendments, and more. When zone applications are received, the City Planning Commission analyzes the requests and presents the facts about the project, along with a recommendation for a decision by the Planning Commission or a recommendation to the City Council. Our goal is to carefully consider each project and make decisions that will balance the individual rights with the public welfare and general well-being of the community. Before we begin, I request that you turn off all cell phones as a courtesy to others and to limit interference to our audio and video broadcasts. Also, no signs are allowed in the council chambers. And we will start with public statements. We will now receive any public statements. This time is reserved for anyone wishing to address the Commission on any matter not on the consent calendar public hearing portion of the agenda. If you are here on items 5A through 5C or 6A, this is not the time to speak. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the Commission on a matter not on the consent calendar public hearing or hearing portions of the agenda? If so, please come forward and state your name. Not seeing anyone. Then we will now move on to the consent calendar, non-public hearing items. These agenda items typically involve housekeeping or administrative decisions that do not require a public hearing. Does any commissioner wish to remove a consent calendar non-public hearing item or for separate consideration? No? Okay. May I have a motion to adopt the staff's recommendation on the consent calendar non-public hearing items?
So moved.
Chairperson Lomas, can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Chairperson Cater, thank you. What's that? Okay, this will be a roll call vote.
Commissioner Schwartz?
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas?
Yes.
Commissioner Bell?
Yes.
Commissioner Cater?
Yes.
Commissioner Rednick?
Yes.
Okay, we will now move on to the consent calendar public hearings. During this portion of the agenda, the public has an opportunity to comment on the consent calendar public hearing items listed in the agenda. In order to be heard on an item, a speaker must first ask that the item be moved from this portion of the agenda to the public hearing portion of the agenda. Any items not moved by a member of the public or a commissioner will be voted on in one motion without further comment. At this time, I will open all the consent calendar public hearing items. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on a consent calendar public hearing item? Please come forward and state your name. And remember, this is not the time to take testimony, so.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and that would be just fine. Karen Johnson, Northeast resident, and I am asking to have that moved to the public hearing portion of the calendar that you suggested. So that there can be comment on 5A and also 6A.
Okay, so 5A, extension of time for vesting, okay. So you would like 5A and 6A.
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, 6A is on the agenda because it's a public
Okay,
hearing item. So
that's
that will
fine.
be heard and you'll have an opportunity.
Yes,
And
sir.
you'd like to include 5A, so we will delay on that. Okay. That item will be moved. At this time, the public, does any commissioner wish to move a consent calendar public hearing item? No? At this time, the public hearing on all of the consent calendar public hearing items, with the exception of 5A, are now closed. May I get a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent calendar public hearing items not moved, incorporating all staff memoranda and revised staff recommendations, if any? Can you just say it, please?
I sure can. I'll move that agenda item 5B and 5C be approved, incorporating the planning director's memos dated June 14th and 15th, and the public works memo dated June 15th, 2017.
Can I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Chairperson Bell, thank you. Madam Secretary, this is a roll call vote?
Commissioner Schwartz,
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas.
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to move on to item 6, the public hearing. And I have a little bit of information to share. It is now time to hear the consent calendar public hearing items removed from that portion of the agenda, as well as the public hearing items. Before we begin, I want to explain how each hearing will be conducted. Staff will first give a report, then those in favor of the project will be allowed to speak. Those in opposition to the project will be able to speak after all those in favor have spoken. Each side will then be given a 5-minute rebuttal period. The commissioners may ask questions of those who have spoken to seek clarification. Individual speakers may also ask questions during their statements, but the questions will not be answered until the public hearing on that item is closed. Written comments may be given to the clerk, who will provide copies to the commission. While there are no time limitations for public speakers before the Planning Commission, please be respectful of others participating in the hearing by not repeating the remarks of previous speakers and presenting any new comments or thoughts and please present any new comments or thoughts in a concise and clear manner. Ms. Kitchen, would you please provide us with your staff report? What?
Would that be for agenda item 5A?
Do you have anything prepared for 5A?
We do.
I think you should include that as well.
Okay. That is going to be presented by the principal planner for this project, Ms. Jenny Ng.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm Jenny Ng with the Planning Department. Extension of time request for vesting tentative parcel map 12112 is located at the northeast corner of Stockdale Highway and Coffee Road. The property is zoned for CO, professional office, and commercial office development. The original parcel map was approved for 13 parcels on 14.76 acres. Sorry. and is commonly known as Stockdale Center. In June of 2014, your commission approved the original parcel map that created the 13 parcels. Since then, 3 phases have recorded, 2 phases remain unrecorded. Construction of the property has begun, and in December of 2015, the Board of Zoning Adjustment approved 3 conditional use permits. One permit was to construct a 4-story, 118-room hotel in the CO district. Second one was a 6,000 square foot convenience store with gas pumps. And the third conditional use permit was approved for a 7,300 square foot multi-tenant restaurant building. The applicant is requesting a 3-year extension of time. The Subdivision Map Act allows up to 6 years of additional time to complete or to record the tentative parcel map. The city typically approves extensions of time in 2 3-year increments, and this is the first request for the first 3 years. And if approved, it would extend the tentative map expiration date to June 18th, 2020, and staff is making that recommendation to approve that extension of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ng. I will now ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the project. The public hearing on this item is open. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor?
Roger McIntosh with McIntosh & Associates. I'm speaking in favor of it. This is a request for a 3-year extension on a vesting tentative tract map at this location, which is the northeast corner of Stockdale Highway and Coffee Road. As Ms. Ng mentioned, we've recorded the first 3 phases, and we're ready to go into phase number 4, and are preparing plans to come in and record that phase shortly. So we need the 3-year extension to allow us to continue on with the project. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
I will now ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the project. Would you like to speak on it, Ms.?
My apology, I made a mistake.
Oh, okay. Okay, so you did not want to address this topic?
That's correct, my apologies.
Okay. So, Andy, what do we do at this point? Do we vote on it, or do we wait? Okay. So,
Go ahead and ask if anyone else wants to speak in opposition, but if not, we can close the public hearing and have a vote.
Okay. Once again, is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? And seeing no one, can we have a motion to approve 5A?
I'd like to ask some questions, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Awesome.
That's what we're here for.
I remember this project when it came through, and I know this isn't conditional on the map, but I'd like some point of clarification from staff. As the commission, we approve this as commercial office. And then it goes to the Board of Zoning, and it, in use, changed from what I thought it was going to be. So commercial office sounds to me like offices, and now we have a gas station on this project, and we have a 4-story hotel. And I remember the stories were of concern of the neighbors. So what am I missing?
Sure, Commissioner Lomas, I'll answer that. The zoning ordinance does allow for you to request a other type of commercial use in a CO zone with a conditional use permit, and that goes through the same public hearing process that the original zone change did, in the way that it's noticed to the neighbors the same way, but it is a different hearing body that hears conditional use permits. It's the Board of Zoning Adjustment, whereas zone changes are heard by the commission and the council. So there are different hearing bodies that make those decisions, but the public notification process is the same.
I've been on this commission a long time, and this is the first time I've ever seen this happen. Like I said, I had expectations as a commissioner that this would be an office project. And I believe that the neighbors had that too. So I would love a tutorial or at least an understanding of each project as they come through on what could potentially happen. Yes, it's a public hearing, but it's not the same body. You understand where I'm going with this?
I do. One thing to note is the map up above shows where those conditional use permits are. The remaining balance of the property is still CO and would only allow CO uses. So it might be appropriate for your commission to let the applicant know, who is here today, that it is the desire of the commission that those remaining uses be developed with commercial. And we can also ensure that your commission receives any packets or agendas for future BZA items.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. We used to receive those. And as it stands now, the neighbors that were concerned, if the rest of the parcel, the rest of the property is developed as office, I think the neighbors that were here that evening would still be okay with their concerns. So I would love to know how we can, I know we can't at this point in this structure, but I am concerned that this type of thing happens. So,
We will, the principal planner that oversees that, the BZA, is also here tonight. So I see him taking notes over there. We will add the planning commission to that BZA agenda as well.
thank you.
And I believe Chairperson Rudnick would like to speak.
Thank you. I've lived in the area for about 20 years, and I'm happy to see something's going on that piece of land. My understanding why it was CO is because you guys had some kind of a conflict issue with the other parcel across the street, so you had to go office instead of going shopping center at one point in time, and you might want to address that and refresh my memory. I don't really have an issue with what's going on there at the moment. I'm happy, like I say, to see things being developed. But I would like to see if there's a PD overlay that we can apply to the balance of the project. And is that what's already been discussed and agreed to, or am I asking for something different?
To do that would require a zone change action. And maybe to help with your other question, I do believe that there was a covenant on this property. I don't know the term. I think it was 20 years.
Right.
And it was a private agreement that precluded development for a period of time.
Right.
That covenant has since expired.
Okay.
So that's why development's moving forward now. At this point, the applicant would need to request a zone change to add the PCD overlay.
Is that what's going to be happening then? Is that a question for the developer? Or?
We don't have any application for a PCD zone change.
Okay. Mr. McIntosh, would you like to address anything I've brought up to enlighten me, or?
Roger McIntosh. I was not involved in the conditional use permits that were applied for. I wasn't even aware of them until after the fact. I can tell you that Phase 4 is a commercial office project that I'm working on now. I was brought into it after the CUPs were processed by the architects of those first three areas. So we will go through the site plan review as we normally do in a CO zone. I don't see that there will be any other retail type of uses in phases 4 and 5. Our site plan that I'm currently working on has office, commercial on all the rest and remaining areas.
But that could change as demand changes for the site, I'm assuming.
It's possible that somebody could come in, but they would have to apply for a conditional use permit, as pointed out.
Okay.
And I'm not involved in all of that process, but it could happen.
Great. Thank you. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Any further comments from any of the other commissioners, or? Okay. At this point, so Ms. Kitchen, can you just summarize what we're going to do from this point on with this so that we're all clear on that?
If you're asking about the conditional use permit question, we
Yeah.
will be adding each of you to the distribution list for the BZA packet and agenda, and those are emailed out a week prior to the hearing or several days prior to the hearing. And so you'll have the ability to look at the items on the agenda, and if there's anything of concern, you'd be able to contact staff and we can address those concerns.
Okay, and I actually don't have any, personally, I don't have any objection to it, because I remember when there was a gas station on the other side of the street on Stockdale. And that is actually, you know, that's handy, but that's just my thoughts. And I think this area of town, that area of town could certainly use another hotel, because that would be, I know the other one is usually filled to capacity. Okay, then, can I have a motion to approve 5A? Or,
A motion?
thank you, Mr. Cater. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Rudnick. Madam Secretary, this will be a roll call vote?
Commissioner Schwartz,
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now move on to public hearing item 6A. The public hearing, hold on one second. The public hearing, okay, the public hearing on this item is open. Hold on one second. Let me read my notes here. Okay. This is a carryover from the last Planning Commission meeting, and so this is a continuation, and I believe it's still open. And so at this point, I'd like to ask Ms. Kitchen to provide her staff report.
Thank you, Chairman Schwartz. Ms. Singh and I are both a little under the weather today, so we're going to share the presentation today, and Ms. Singh's going to
I'm
start.
sorry to hear that.
It's quite all right.
I'm Jenny Ng with the Planning Department, and this is zone change 17-0047, and it is a continued public hearing from June 1st, 2017 meeting. The zone change request is from a, PCD, planned commercial development, to a C2 regional commercial zone, or more restrictive district, on 36.41 acres. McIntosh Associates is representing City Lights LLC and Mark Chris Investments LLC on the project. It is located in northeast Bakersfield between State Route 178 and Mallview Road, approximately a third of a mile west of Oswell Street. The mall is a major commercial center in northeast Bakersfield, and the existing commercial development is located in an area that is adjacent to other existing commercial businesses. The current mall and commercial entitlements were approved in the 1980s, and construction of the current mall began around 1990. Currently, the mall is closed and vacant, and the building is boarded up. The applicants have stated that their intention is to demolish the existing mall, except for 2 anchor buildings, construct a Class A open-air retail shopping center within the same general footprint, and add several satellite commercial buildings throughout the existing parking lot. The total commercial development area would be 358,295 square feet. The existing PCD zone district requires that a specific layout, design, and aesthetic be required on any new project, and that would be approved through a public hearing by the Planning Commission and then adopted by the City Council. The PCD zone allows for greater latitude and additional architectural oversight beyond the typical development standards that are required under our current zoning ordinance. Development under the requested C2 zone, as the applicant has requested, does not require any further Planning Commission oversight or a public hearing or any other, or a public hearing. However, staff is recommending that a C2 PCD combining zone be approved. The combining zone provides the Planning Commission approval after a public hearing that considers the site plan, but does not require the City Council approval unless the item is appealed from the Planning Commission. With the combining PCD zone, that would allow the Planning Commission to consider building architecture, parking and landscape design review. And as the project is phased, if the applicant chooses to do that, the Planning Commission may also consider the, excuse me, the aesthetic theme of the development. The PCD combining zone offers the flexibility for the developer to phase the project in response to the market and includes an option for minor changes to site plans to be approved by the planning director with reports to the Planning Commission as they progress through the development phase. As I said before, the public hearing for this item was continued from June 1st to allow staff time to review and respond to comments submitted by Mr. Grumman of Project CEQA. A memo has been provided to your commission that includes his letter and responds to these comments. There are no changes to staff's recommendation to adopt the mitigated negative declaration or a change to staff's recommendation for a C2 PCD combining zone. Director Kitchen has additional information regarding the CEQA analysis and staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Singh. Well, she just about covered everything, so I don't have to say too much. So just a little bit of background on the process that's taken place to date. The applicant first came and met with the city in late 2016 and described a project to upgrade the East Hills Mall, as Ms. Singh said. And so upon receipt of this application, staff began reviewing the history, doing the research, and looking into the details. A site visit reviewed that the current condition of the East Hills Mall isn't what it once was. In the last 30 years since it was first developed, it's changed hands a numerous amount of times, and large portions of the parking lot have fallen into disrepair. These photos show some of that. When the applicant came in 2016 and met with staff, they indicated that they would be doing a high-end lifestyle center, and these images were released to the media around that time, but no specific development plan was submitted to the city at that time. Then in 2017, the formal application was submitted for the C2, and in researching that, the city looked at how the C2 has been applied and how the PCD has been applied throughout the city. And we found that a majority of the more recently constructed shopping centers do include the PCD combining zone, but then again, there are several that do not. And those are shown here, and this table was in the staff report provided to you on June 1st. And this map shows a little bit how the PCD and C2 zone are spread out throughout the city. The green is the standalone C2, or I'm sorry, the red is the standalone C2, and the green is the PCD or PCD combining zones. So as you can see, it's been a variety of both, and it's pretty case specific. The research also showed that when this site was first approved in 1979, the original request was denied, and the project was sent back. Then when it came to hearing again later, the PCD zone was added at that time to ensure quality development, and findings were made that this zone was a good zoning practice, and it would ensure compliance with the intent of the general plan. A couple other items that occurred after submittal, staff did receive a formal request from the applicant to have a deviation or relief from the current development standards, and a formal request was made to leave the parking lot under its current condition and not do the current development upgrades. And as Ms. Singh said, that there was also a comment letter that came in from a Sacramento attorney with very extensive CEQA comments, and we do believe those have been adequately addressed and responded to in the memo that was provided to you today. So in finalizing the recommendation, staff found that the zoning ordinance states that the PCD zone may be used as a combining zone to assign a base use and a base entitlement, but still also ensure that future development and specific layout is compatible with surrounding development. And staff concluded that approval of a C2 PCD combining was a good compromise because it would still provide your commission and the community with an opportunity to review the specific design later. but it would also allow the developer an assurance of what kind of uses would be permitted on the site with that base of C2. And it would also allow the developer to streamline future review because we're doing the CEQA analysis and the environmental review now, and it would be complete. And we wouldn't need to do that for the future specific PCD approval. So overall, we felt like this was the best compromise, and that's why staff is recommending C2 PCD to your commission tonight. And we're here if you have any questions.
No, I think you, for my part, I think you explained it very well, but let's see if any of the other commissioners have any questions. Seeing none? Well, in that case, thank you, Ms. Ng and Ms. Kitchen. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Before we do that, can we go ahead and open the public hearing and take the public comments, and then we can ask the commission questions at that time?
Yes, we can. So, let's, do we need a vote for that?
No, let's just go open the public hearing, and then we can take the public comments.
Okay. And so, after the public comments, because Chairperson Rudnick has a question or a comment. Or after the public hearing? Okay. Well, then the public hearing is now open, and and thank you for your report, Ms. Kitchen. And I will now ask if there's anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the project. I think there is someone who would like to speak. Mr. McIntosh?
Is this in favor of the staff recommendation or in favor of the project?
In favor of the staff recommendation,
Okay, thank you.
because I believe that's what we're here to discuss today. Is there, okay, is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor of the staff recommendation at this point? No? Anyone would like, is there anyone who would like to speak against the staff recommendation? Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Roger McIntosh with McIntosh & Associates Engineering, and I'm representing City Lights, LLC, and Mark Chris Investments, LLC, the owners of what formerly was known as East Hills Mall. I wanted to give you a little background of the project and where it came from and where we'd like to have it head. This is an exhibit. This was out of the 1979 application draft EIR. This shows the layout of the mall that was submitted in 1979 that was subsequently sent back for redesign. In 1986, the East Hills Mall was submitted again, and this layout shows how the mall, with a large tenant on the west end, a large tenant on the east end, the theater was in the middle, and assorted shops as an interior mall was proposed. And then in 1986, again, a submittal was presented with the addition of a large tenant, which was the Harris department store. The store on the east was Gottschalk's, the store on the west was a Mervyn's, and the Harris was in the middle. This project is an application to repurpose 492,000 square feet of East Hills Mall into a maximum of 358,295 square feet, and that's 133,788 square foot reduction in the retail space. I'm sure that many of you have been following the retail experience. In the last few years, several of the large retailers have gone out of business or have downsized dramatically. Just last Tuesday, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal talking about the projections of the closure of the stores. Basically, in the 1980s and the 1990s, the U.S. became oversaturated with malls. But now we see a huge increase in online sales, so that these large retailers are needing to downsize. It's projected that 8,600 stores will close next year alone. This year we've had 2,880 stores, retailers that have closed their doors in several of these indoor malls. Retailers such as Sports Authority, Macy's, Kmart, PetSmart, Hagen, JCPenney, Sears, Golfsmith, Kohl's, and even Walmart has reduced their footprint in these malls. And consequently, these malls are becoming dinosaurs. We're struggling, a lot of the developers are struggling with what to do with these malls and bringing in new tenants and repurposing them. And what we're proposing to do on this particular mall is to repurpose it into more of a lifestyle center. This is just a picture of what the mall looks like today. You can see the parking lot is vacant, very few trees, not up to current standards. And I also wanted to point out that the distance from the nearest residential is 700 feet to the north to the nearest residential unit across a freeway, and this is a mini storage unit. There are some apartments over here that frankly should be torn down. And then to the south, it's over a quarter mile to these residential units to the south. So there's retail all around the East Hills Mall, and there's plenty of buffers to protect whatever goes on there from the neighbors. So what we're proposing is to, as staff reported, keep the easterly large box, split it into 2 tenant spaces, turn the indoor mall into more of an outdoor mall, keep the theater in the middle, add a plaza area in front of that, tenant space to the west, wrap it around and include another plaza area, and then add additional out parcels or pads that would be used for restaurants, fast food, individual retailers, potentially a bank on the east end, and repurpose the mall into more of a lifestyle center. It gives people a place to go for entertainment. We want to bring in the entertainment aspect of it and expand on that. It used to be in the 80s and 90s, the kids would go to the malls for a social gathering. Now you see them walking around and socializing on their phones all day long, so they don't really need to go to the mall. We've gone through many iterations with potential tenants, and part of the reason we're asking for straight C2 zoning is because with a PCD plan like the one that was approved here, any changes have to go back through a process, whether it be all the way back to City Council or back to the Planning Commission for reapproval. And when we get into negotiations and discussions with tenants, some tenants have specific guidelines and requests that they want to see. Some tenants like to control what goes on in the mall within their area, how they're affected with parking, access, etc. And it's very difficult to negotiate with a tenant and then go back to another tenant and negotiate something with them, go back between the tenants to make it all work and come together. There will be many iterations on this site plan as we move forward, and the PCD process makes it cumbersome where we go back to the tenants and then come back to the Planning Commission. A lot of times the tenants won't commit to a lease unless they have approval from the city. And if we have to come back to the city every time we make a change, other than through site plan review, it becomes difficult to negotiate those tenants and bring those tenants in to make a successful mall. And while it may not seem to be much of a delay to come back to the Planning Commission, it is potentially 1 to 2 months to come back in front of the Planning Commission until we have approval, and we can go back to the tenants and say, yes, we can agree to this, or no. And then if something else changes, we've got to come back again. This is just another site plan. I'm just showing this because this is different than the previous site plans that I showed you, and these are all results of iterations that we've gone through after speaking with different tenants. We're trying to make everyone happy on the tenant side to make this successful. We have agreed to update the landscaping to current standards. And I also wanted to address some of the items that were suggested in the staff report, such as the Northeast Bakersfield landscape standards, the Northeast Bakersfield lighting standards, and the Northeast Bakersfield commercial standards. In the handout I've given you, I wanted to point out that Northeast Bakersfield is considered a project that is east of Fairfax Road. We are not east of Fairfax Road, we are west of Fairfax Road. So we would ask that those standards do not apply to this, as it's not applicable. The design standards for large retail development only applies to in addition to an existing large retail development that was not previously subject to the requirements of this section, which this project would fall into that category. And that only if the expansion or addition of the project is more than 50% of the original square footage. In this case, we're downsizing, we're reducing the size of the mall by 133,000 square feet. So the large retail ordinance should not apply. The Northeast lighting and commercial standards should not apply. Again, as I stated, this project is west of Fairfax Road. Those standards only apply to projects that are east of Fairfax Road. I wanted to address the CEQA categorical exemption. I've given you information on categorical exemptions under CEQA. And under section 15,300, 15300, in response to the mandate, the Secretary of Resources has found that the following classes of projects listed in this article do not have a significant effect on the environment, and they are declared to be categorically exempt from the requirement of the preparation of environmental documents. And as you go through the information I provided you, this particular project falls under a Class 2 exemption, which is a project that consists of replacement or reconstruction of existing structures and facilities where the new structure will be located on the same site as the structure replaced and will have substantially the same purpose and capacity as the structure replaced, including but not limited to the replacement of a commercial structure with a new structure of substantially the same size, purpose, and capacity. So we're not increasing anything. We're actually decreasing the size. We're on the same site. It's for the same use. And we feel very strongly that we are categorically exempt. And I actually have had several conversations with staff, and I think that they concur with that analysis. In spite of that, staff elected to, and we agreed to do studies on traffic, archaeological, biological impacts, and air quality. We looked at the traffic, impacts, and we analyzed the decrease in square footages, compared it to the existing land use, which is the PCD, over 400,000 square feet, and determined that under your ordinance, a traffic study was not required because we were actually reducing the traffic, and that traffic that was already proposed to be there was included in the regional transportation modeling and impact fee. We also looked at biological impacts. There is a Bakersfield cactus area that is on the easterly side of the project that we are not going to touch. It was mitigation as part of the original project, and we're leaving that alone. The archaeological study, obviously it's a mall, it's a developed site, so there's no archaeological impacts. The air quality impact looked at cumulative impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, looked at operating emissions of the existing mall, and compared it to operating emissions of a revised, reduced-sized mall, and found that there were no significant impacts or impacts that were less than significant. And we also looked at, during that air quality analysis, construction impacts. And when you construct a project, you fall under what's called an indirect source rule. It's an ISR category that has been adopted by San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District, and they concurred with the findings of the AQIA. So if the state of California finds this project exempt from CEQA and further review, we have to ask the question, why does the city of Bakersfield feel that it should be under greater scrutiny? The state of California has the toughest environmental laws in the country. Section 21000 out of the Public Resources Code, the policy states that it is necessary to provide a high-quality environment that at all times is healthful and pleasing to the senses and intellect of man. That comes straight out of the CEQA guidelines. Yet the state of California suggests, and we agree, that this project should be exempt from further scrutiny. I also wanted to point out, I think it was shown on the overhead, on page 8 of the staff report, it lists the projects that are under a PCD currently and also projects that were under a C2. Several of those projects under the C2 zone I've been involved in. The Marketplace, very successful project. Grand Islands, Buena Vista and Ming, very successful project. Town and Country Village at Coffee and Stockdale across from the previous project that I spoke to. All of those were very successful. Valley Plaza, Ming and Weibel, those are all under C2 zones. A good example of a PCD plan that didn't work is the one that you're looking at tonight. That was a PCD plan. That doesn't make it successful. What makes it successful are the market forces that dictate that success, not a PCD that goes in front of the Planning Commission or the City Council. So in summary, we are requesting the C2 zoning. We need to be flexible, to have that flexibility to deal with tenants, to be able to bring successfully all those tenants together. We agree with the exemption under CEQA, although we have responded to all the comments under Mr. Grunman's letter and are ready to go forward. We do not want Northeast standards. We don't feel that they apply to this project. We do not want large retail standards, especially because those standards are onerous and an existing mall that was built in 1986. We will comply with the updated ADA accessibility standards, which we have to comply with, but as far as the large retail standards, we don't think those apply. And we do not agree that there should be any Northeast commercial standards. So with that, we are not in agreement with staff's recommendations, but we are asking for the original application request of C2 zoning, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Let me, at this time, is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to this staff recommendation?
Thank you, Chairman Schwartz, Planning Commissioners. My name is Dwayne Keithley. I'm with Cushman & Wakefield, and it's my job to lease this project, or I'm going to be out of a job. Two matters tonight for your consideration, and I will be brief. Roger covered most everything. The first one is retail development, specifically large-scale retail development, as opposed to office and industrial. And the second is public input in the PCD process. Retail, as all of you know, is a little bit different than office and industrial. In office and industrial, we have a site plan, an elevation. We take a look at those. They get approved. We have landscape, parking, and then really all the improvements occur within the four walls. What you see on the exterior really remains the same. Which in retail, it's very different. And if I could ask you in your minds to think about Riverwalk, Castle and Cook's project, if you picture Nordstrom Rack, looks very different than DSW, which looks very different from TJ Maxx, and so on and so forth. All of these retailers have specific elevations, heights, dimensions, et cetera. And so it makes it, as Roger mentioned, it makes it difficult in the timing process when one of these tenants changes their footprint, and then there's a lengthy process to go back and get that. It's not that we mind the conditions. We want to turn this, what's basically a defunct eyesore today, into a beautiful new shopping center and entertainment center. But we need some flexibility with which to do that. Secondly, the PCD process. I've lived here all my life. I've been in this business 31 years, and I'm a fan of the PCD process. It works, and it helps in neighborhoods. And we just finished a PCD development with Ron Froelich and Allen and Brimhall, and the process worked great. The neighbors got together. We had town hall meetings. Our planning staff came, and we came to address issues like light shed and noise and delivery times, things like this which are important in a neighborhood. The difference here that I would like for you to consider is we don't have any residential neighbors. And so my request for you to consider is I believe our C2 ordinance really speaks to what needs to happen here. And as I said, I'm a fan of the PCD process, but I feel like it's not applicable and somewhat cumbersome. The developers are going to have to try to open this mall all at once. Every tenant that I'm working with wants it all to be opened all at once. They don't want construction going on the west end while we open the east end, which means we have to sign leases, and those leases have penalties. So if you don't hit the penalty, and those penalties are very onerous. So if someone changes their footprint and we have these dates to deliver and then we have to go back through a public hearing process, then it could put some of the project in jeopardy. So I would like to just leave you with this for consideration. We are redeveloping an infill project, which is currently vacant and defunct, as I mentioned. As Roger mentioned, we're reducing the amount of retail square footage from 450 approximately to 350. I believe we're adding a lot of value and convenience in Northeast Bakersfield. We're reducing trips that shoppers currently make. And if you looked at some of the tenant names, with the exception of the theaters, all of our tenants do not exist east of Freeway 99. So the people on the east side are driving to the west side, and this will curtail that. We're not disturbing a single residential neighbor, and as I said, I would propose that the C2 zoning ordinance that we have in place would be sufficient, and it would give us more flexibility timing-wise. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much, and I'll be available for questions as well.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Keithley. Let's see. Somebody else? Yes. Please come to the podium and state your name, please.
Hi, Commissioner Schwartz, Karen Johnson. And actually, I'm addressing the question to the commission because I'd like to know what the phases, what the steps are so that I could have some input. I have watched carefully, having lived in the area for years, the gazanias planted on the slopes growing beautifully. We have huge trees that managed to survive the drought all the way through and down Mallview Road and along Highway 178. And I'd like to know how I can and other neighbors can have input on the plan that those would be retained and protected and cared for, because as I looked at the plans that Mr. McIntosh shared, it looked like there was a possibility of tenants, maybe 5 tenants, maybe 9 tenants, which could directly affect where they're going to put them and the effect it would have on those beautiful Bakersfield trees that survived. So how can I have a part in that, Chairman Schwartz?
Well, and, at this point, I'm going to ask some questions when you get done, but state your question, and I don't have the answer. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to talk with the staff and ask them to answer your question.
That would be fine. I just don't know exactly the process. I'd just like to be heard about that. Thank you.
And I'm not sure of the process myself, so
All right.
I will ask the same question.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Mr. McIntosh?
Yes, thank you. I can show this on the overhead. Roger McIntosh again. I just had an answer to her question.
That would be fine. Thank you.
The mature trees around the site are controlled by a property owners association up and down Mallview Road, and we cannot touch those. We cannot take those out. We're leaving those alone. We're showing them on this plan just to give you an idea of the landscaping that will be involved. All of these trees will remain. The Bakersfield cactus area is this green area over here.
Can you speak in the microphone, please?
The Bakersfield cactus area is this green area on the east end of the mall. All of these trees around along the freeway are controlled by that same property owner association. So we are not touching anything around the exterior that is mature that we don't have any control over. Everything that I'm showing here interior-wise, I think there's an existing tree here and maybe one over here, but we're adding all of these trees interior to make it much more of a landscaped area. We're not touching anything on the exterior.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh.
And we will agree to that if you would prefer to make that a condition.
Okay. Well, let me, at this point, does any commissioner, is there anyone else, before I go on, is there anyone else who'd like to speak in opposition? And of course, Ms. Johnson wasn't really in opposition, but she had a question, a valid question. Not seeing anyone, then I'd like to turn it back to the commission and see if they have any questions. What's that? Okay. At this time, let's close the public hearing and turn it back to the commission to see if they have any questions for either the people, Mr. McIntosh, Mr. Keithley, or any of our Bakersfield staff members. So, Mr. Commissioner, and starting with Mr. Rudnick.
Thank you. First off, I would like to compliment staff for doing a very difficult job in trying to get everybody's concerns met and still get the flavor of all of our requirements completed. So I compliment you on doing the hybrid zoning, I guess, if that's a good way to say it. I also like to compliment the developer for taking on a difficult project in a very difficult dynamic of the retail industry, which, yes, I'm very aware of the decline of many of these stores. So, and I also grew up on the east side, so I'm happy to see more things being developed in that area. I'm a little disappointed that the developer is not wanting to cooperate with what staff is doing as far as lighting and the other comments, because they think long and hard on these issues before they give you their recommendations, and I would hope that you would probably reconsider that in that situation. I also am happy that you're agreeing to upgrade your landscaping because it's pretty dismal out there right now, and the landscaping, I think you'll find, will be a very good asset for you in the future. I understand your logic to your project. You're kind of mirroring this like the Marketplace a little bit and the Riverwalk developments, which I think are both very successful projects. But I do agree with staff in the fact that I think it is a very positive thing to have the Planning Commission and, if necessary, having the council involved in the design or architectural style or whatever it is that we have exact purview on, because this project has been such an eyesore for so many years, and it does affect a lot of different things. And I do appreciate Mr. Keithley's issue with trying to wrangle the tenants and getting things put together, but we do meet twice a month. And I am speaking for myself at this point, but I think most of the commissioners here would be happy to meet with you if we had to have an emergency issue, because you've got a big fish you've got to fry and you need something done from us. I'd be happy to help you. You know, I don't think we're trying to work against you. I think we're trying to help the community and help you guys get your jobs done and get our economy working. So if that helps you at all, give you some, you know, peace with what our, at least my perspective on our process up here is. But I would definitely want to let you know that I am for the staff recommendation of keeping the hybrid zoning as they presented it. I think it's a very good compromise for all parties concerned. I do have some questions. I'm not sure if this would be to the developer or to the Mr. McIntosh, but you're kind of opening up, you know, I've seen a few different footprints of what you're doing out there, and one of them, with the heat in Bakersfield, let me just say it this way, and you know, we don't have inclement weather, but we have this heat for 90 to 120 days. Are you concerned about people not wanting to go there because it is more of an outdoor mall versus what you had previously? And obviously this is an economic issue that you folks wrestle with, but I'm just curious your thoughts.
Roger McIntosh, to answer that question, Commissioner Rudnick. Of course, it's more uncomfortable at 110 degrees in the summertime to be outdoors than it is indoors. We are proposing several misters, shade canopies around the site, trees, landscaping that will provide shade. But when you look at the Marketplace, that's strictly an outdoor mall.
Right.
You know, you go to the stores and you do your business, or you go outside and you sit in the plaza, or you go to the theater. It's not that unpopular of a place to go. I was involved in the outlets at Tejon. That's completely an outdoor mall. We do get hot summers, but there are ways to mitigate that with outdoor fans and misters and shade. We ended up putting in these very large fans at Tejon outlets that keep the air moving and keep it cooler. If you do get overheated, you step into a store. That's the whole idea. Get you out of the heat and get you into the stores. So we have taken that into account, and we'll incorporate those type of mitigation measures.
Are you going to have covered walkways like they have at the Marketplace? Is that part of the design, or?
Probably in some locations. If you remember the site plan I showed you also, we've positioned the buildings around the plaza, for example, right, to provide shade in the afternoon setting sun on that plaza area. And the other plaza off to the west had buildings to the west of that. So with the building providing shade, as well as canopies and landscaping, we'll create that shade canopy. And of course, the restaurants will have outdoor patios, and they will likely be on the north side of those buildings, so that they will be more protected during the day as well.
Good. Thank you. And then, Mr. Keithley, you talked about you have a bunch of tenants that you're working with. Could you enlighten us on who might be coming so we can get excited?
Dwayne Keithley, Cushman & Wakefield, Commissioner Rudnick. I can't give you any specific names tonight.
Okay.
We have 6 major tenants. Then I'm going to say major is above 30,000 square feet. And just to go off on a little bit of a tangent, one of the things that we're finding today in retail, if you pay attention to that kind of a thing, is Burlington Coat Factory used to be 80,000 feet. Today they're 40. Best Buy was 40. Today they're 25. And so the e-commerce effect, the Amazon effect, is having an effect on retailers. So we have 6 retailers, including a theater, all above 30,000 square feet. As I mentioned, all of them are located in Bakersfield, and only the theater is only the theater exists east of 99. All of the other tenants, major tenants, are west of 99, but not east. And just to tag on to what Roger said, we looked at shopping centers in Phoenix and Scottsdale and other places that have, warm summers. And they're very successful with their outdoor type shopping centers with trellises and misters and shade and, as you mentioned, walkways with shade, as the marketplace has. So that's absolutely a part of our plan.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments, Mr.?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'd like to turn the floor over to Commissioner Bell for his questions and comments.
Thank you. You stole my thunder there, Commissioner. I should have known that the experienced commissioners up here would probably have all the right questions and all the right things to say, but Mr. Keithley, Mr. McIntosh, knowing that lifestyle centers are exactly what the future holds, and I've been exposed to that myself, I am very sympathetic to the fact that you want to get going. The C2 stuff is a faster path. However, like Commissioner Rudnick said, I would rather commit our time, our efforts, a phone call, doing whatever we can as a commission to get you. I'll commit it publicly that we'll take phone calls, that will shorten that period. From what I understood from staff, and I made phone calls to get clarification, you have the option of phasing, which doesn't sound like it's something you want to do, Mr. Keithley, but also that we can do a lot of variations without having to come back to public hearing. I would really want to recommend to staff that you open those doors widely to them. And then secondly, this might be a question to staff, but I'm in agreement largely with what Mr. McIntosh says about both the CEQA issue and with the Northeast standards. I am not aware of the specifics of the retail standard. I'll pose that in a question to staff. What are your feelings about that? Do we have a door that we can open a little wider to them? I am certainly a huge proponent of this development being done. Don't really want to be a hindrance, but at the same time, we want to represent our community as best that we can and see if we can't have a small amount of compromise by leaving the PCD on. And I apologize for that because I do not want to stand in the way, but on the other hand, we want to have a little bit of oversight here. That's just my opinion. Thank you. Staff?
Sure. Commissioner Bell, to address your question regarding the Northeast standards first, as you mentioned, you and Mr. Cater are both some of the newer commissioners. However, in the past, the Planning Commission has considered many PCD plans. And in the past, some of them have been a little complicated, and the Commission has asked for guidance in what the latitude of regulations can be with the PCD plan. How far can it go? How far should it go? Given that this particular project is in the Northeast, and as Mr. Keithley and McIntosh both indicated, there isn't a lot of other retail development of this scale east of Highway 99 and north of Brundage, I guess, or Ming. Those standards were included in the staff report as a reference for your commission. They were not suggested, they were a reference point and somewhere to begin, and to give your commission an idea of what the latitude could be with the PCD zone. Then with regard to your question on CEQA, the request for an exemption was not made until very late in the game by the applicant, when we had already gone through the process of preparing the mitigated negative declaration. The applicant had already signed off, had been distributed, and then this request for an exemption came in at the last minute. And in wanting to work together with the applicant, we considered it and looked at it and decided to include both in the recommendation tonight, because we do believe that potentially the demolition of the existing mall could apply for that exemption. However, the addition of the satellite pads that it's been shown in the conceptuals may not be qualifying for that exemption. So we included both and appreciated the information provided by the applicant, and we see it that both can work.
Thank you, Director. Answers my questions.
Okay, at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Commissioner Cater.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for the presentation, and had the opportunity to hear about the project a few weeks ago as well. And I thank you for being direct and being forthcoming, and also taking an interest in this parcel. And I have a few questions for staff. I think generally I think this is a project, the marketplace gets referenced a lot, and I think that it's been successful because the neighborhood has adopted it, and it's become sort of a regional draw for people living in the Southwest. And I think the East Hills Mall was that for the residents of the Northeast for a while, and it hasn't been for a while. And I think that your project gives an opportunity for that to be sort of a gathering space for, and sort of an identity builder for the Northeast, and I applaud that. I'd like to thank the resident that came to talk about the landscaping, and I think it really indicates that there is a community value in this project that I think a community voices deserve to be heard. And I think that the site's history as a PCD site was probably somewhere in the intentions was to give the community a chance to comment on something that does have an impact at a community level. And so I would have to agree with Mr. Rudnick that I think the staff has done a great job of preparing a report that acknowledges the need to be efficient and the need to move through a process, but also give public input and the chance to talk about what the future of this site is as it develops. So first question for staff was the Riverwalk project, is that a PCD zone or a PCD C2 combining?
It is, actually. I do have a chart I can show. I believe I have it in this presentation. Let me find it. Okay. So the Riverwalk was referenced several times as something phenomenal, which it is. That is a PCD zone. Castle and Cook made it work, and very effectively. And we now have a beautiful project. The marketplace was also referenced. Yes, that is a C2 zone. However, I wasn't with the city yet, but I've looked at the research, and that was a very controversial project when it was constructed. I see some nodding heads, some of you remember. It is C2, but the other component there to keep in mind is that there was a full EIR done for that project with many mitigation measures, which effectively had the same effect as a PCD zone would have. In addition to that, it was developed by Castle and Cook as part of a larger master plan for a whole community. So there are some differences and some nuances there.
Well, and I think also a quick question about the history of PCD. How long has the city been using PCD zoning as an overlay?
That I would have to look at least 10 years,
Okay.
probably a little longer.
Because I did notice that it was a really interesting graphic of the C2 versus the PCD graphic over the city. It does seem like the PCD zoning is a strategy that the city is using for those commercial centers that have neighborhood and community impact. And so,
Right, and one other thing to note is Artisan Square was referenced earlier, and that is within a neighborhood, and PCD worked there for that reason. The purpose of PCD is to address unique projects. If any project site is unique in Bakersfield, I'd say East Hills definitely is. It's a catalyst, it's a regional center, and frankly, the residents of the east side of Bakersfield deserve to have a part in the process.
well, and I would say the Riverwalk is a great example of a project that has adapted and evolved as the market has demanded. It's a very different project today than it was when I was, I think, a junior in high school reading about it in the paper with, promenades and long corridors. And so I think it speaks to the sort of community input, not necessarily being a negative impact. I do appreciate your clarification on the Northeast standards. As a newbie, I did kind of read that as an overlay on the project, which I think Mr. McIntosh is correct in assuming that it doesn't seem like this site is in that zone, so I appreciate that. I did have a question on the large-scale retail development. As far as, does the city classify demolishing and reconstructing versus rehabbing existing in considering the 50%?
Sure, I'm prepared to talk about that one too. 'Cause I knew this was coming. So this is a list of the recent development in the last few years that has all complied with the large retail development standards. As you can see, just about every shopping center happily complies with these standards. These are minimum standards for retail development. They require things like walkways, creating a pedestrian-friendly space, something of a lifestyle center. The mere fact that the applicant has disputed the applicability of these standards may be an additional reason for the PC zone to remain. So as you can see, though, it's widely used. This map shows where those are all located, and the large retail standards have been around for about 10 years and have been applied consistently to all commercial shopping centers.
All right, thank you for those clarifications, and thank you for the presentation tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Cater. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Commissioner Lomas.
Thank you, Chairman. When I first looked at this project, let me also disclose first, though, that I met with Roger McIntosh and the applicant and heard what they had to say a couple weeks ago. And it kept going back and forth in my head on staff's recommendation and what the applicant's asking for. And I wanted to come in here and say, well, we have a project, and how I see a PCD and the value in a PCD is for public input, for the neighbors to step up and say, hey, you're my neighbor, so I want to have a say-so in what my neighborhood looks like. This isn't in a neighborhood. So I thought, okay, I don't really see where a PCD is applicable here because they're not in a neighborhood. And as it's been stated and everyone agrees that the retail climate is difficult. And I can imagine navigating that and getting tenants and getting energy and momentum behind this project has got to be hard, much harder than it's ever been. So I'm thinking, all right, I cannot see a reason not to just let the market dictate. If they're not going to build an ugly shopping center because nobody will go, it's not affecting neighbors directly. But here's where I'm messed up tonight. We just saw a project go through with CO zoning. No overlays, no restraints, nothing that would come back to this commission. And they went around to another body, and that is not televised. We're televised. That's not televised. And now that's a completely different project than what the neighborhood thought they were getting. That was in a neighborhood. I'm still struggling. It's not in a neighborhood, but now I'm not confident in the requirements of the zoning. I was always confident in the requirements of the zoning, but we just saw where a CO has got a hotel on it and a gas station where everybody thought it was going to be office. So I'm sitting here as a commissioner over 10 years, not confident in our zoning. So I have no choice but to go with staff's recommendation. and support the overlay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lomas. Let me also make a few comments. I'm really torn because I remember the book by Jim Collins, which is "Don't Let Great Be the Enemy of Good," and I know that everyone wants, and I believe everyone on this commission wants to see this project go through because of the current condition of the East Hills Mall. It's a blight at this point. And I think what we're all looking for is some protection so that rather than lax requirements, giving you a little firmer requirements, but still providing flexibility and timeliness. Because from what I hear, Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Keithley say, and by the way, in full disclosure, I also met with Mr. McIntosh and the applicant about 2 weeks ago. And I think what they're proposing looks like a tremendous improvement over what's currently there. But again, taking into consideration what Commissioner Lomas just said, that without some control, it turned into a different project. And I think what Mr. McIntosh showed me, and the applicant showed me 2 weeks ago, looks like a great project, and I totally want to see it built. But I also want to have a degree of control, which the city is proposing. And I'm just, I think it was Commissioner Bell who said, is there somewhere in between? Because I believe everyone on this committee would be very responsive if there's a request to look at something and consider something. I know I would, and I know everyone else would too, by the nodding of the heads. Ms. Kitchen, is there some middle ground that we can improve both the processes? Because we want to have some control, but we want the development to have flexibility because we know it's a tough world out there.
Certainly, Commissioner Schwartz. The PCD zone has a built-in mechanism to allow for flexibility. There's a provision that allows for minor adjustments to be administratively approved. Those do still come to your commission. However, it's on a consent agenda. It doesn't need to be noticed. It's just more of an FYI to your condition, and you guys get those on your agenda probably at least once every month or two. All the shopping centers around town have minor adjustments, things they need to do. When you start changing building footprints more drastically and things like that, that would be a more formal revision that would need to have a public notice gone out. But even that process typically takes 4 to 5 weeks. It's pretty quick. And another interesting thing, believe it or not, the planning department also monitors the health and livelihood of the retail industry. And we speak with people who have recently attended the International Council of Shopping Centers conference in Las Vegas, the ICSC, which we've all heard of. And some of the feedback that I got just recently as the last several days was that many tenants like the PCD because it gives them an assurance of what they're buying into and what they're leasing into, and that it will be a quality development. And it gives them an assurance that the city's already on board with it. It's more than just a simple zone district that's still subject to further action by the city. And so I've actually heard more tenants find it an appealing tool.
And as far as the ability to provide flexibility and be able to expedite things, because I think, based on what I'm hearing, I mean, I know you want flexibility, but you really want things to be done expeditiously.
One thing that I can add, when the PCD plan does come back before your commission, at that point, it may be appropriate to specify some caps or limits and degree of change that are acceptable for an administrative review, which is quicker and doesn't need a hearing. And that is something we could do when the PCD plan is initially approved.
That would be good, because I'd like to do as much as we can to fast track something
Absolutely.
like this, because we all want the project built. There's not anyone.
Absolutely, yes.
Mr. McIntosh and Mr. Keithley, your thoughts?
If I could be recognized, if the commission is so inclined to approve the C2 PCD, we would be happy to work with staff to work with changes in that plan. We want it to be consistent. We'll submit the PCD plan for your review, and as long as we can make those changes that are within the purview of the project, that doesn't take away from the project. As we stated, we need the ability to move a tenant from here to there. The site plan may be adjusted. Out parcels may be larger or smaller, as long as it stays within the overall limit of 358,000 square feet, and it doesn't change any of the mitigation measures, and we'd be willing to work with staff to get that accomplished.
That would be great. And that's a step in the right direction. There's no question about that. Mr. Keithley, do you have any thoughts or on what we're talking about?
No, Dwayne Keithley, Commissioner Storts, no. I agree with what Mr. McIntosh said. As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with the city closely on PCDs. It's a good process. It can be a little cumbersome at times. And so I would take Commissioner Bell's offer to be available to us. If we have something that requires a change, and I know that the city will be there to work with us, we're only concerned about the expediency of getting this done and not losing tenants in the process. So, no, to the extent you're willing to work with us, I agree with Roger. We can work within that framework.
And I think that's a very valid concern. And knowing the market like you portrayed it, it's something that I think everyone on this commission would be willing to put in the extra effort to make sure that we're all timely and we can get things done, decisions made extremely quickly, and with the coordination from the planning department, I think we can make it happen.
Good, thank you.
Any other comments from anybody on the commission? Oops, yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Chairperson Lomas, Commissioner. Ms. Lomas, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just want to add one little, as you're drawing your plans and preparing them. I want to throw this out for your consideration. The walkways within a parking lot, does that mean you'll need a parking lot design? Many of the, I want to say the Sam's Club and the Walmart have a walkway through so that a pedestrian can park their car and not have to walk between, they can walk where they're not going to get hit by a car. Is that what they call them? Parking lot walkways.
Yes.
Please consider those for your design when you're looking at your parking lot. Thank you. I'm glad we're able to work this out. Thank you.
Chairman Lomas, that's one of the requirements of the large retail development standards, just so that you're aware.
I would like to recognize Commissioner Rudnick.
I would like to follow suit and recommend the staff to do everything in their power to make this as quick and simple and painless for the developer within your purview to get small things done quickly for them, because I do respect the fact they have an economic interest at risk here. But again, us as a public body, we have to have some review over the bigger picture on things, and I don't see us relinquishing that role.
And I think the best way that we can achieve that is when the PCD plan comes back to have clear parameters for something that's acceptable for an administrative review versus something that should come back before the commission. That will put staff in a position where we're not making subjective judgment calls that we shouldn't be making.
That would be great, and if Mr. Keithley and Mr. McIntosh can request or give her your wish list, that would be great for you folks as well, obviously. So that's terrific. Thank you.
Now that we're talking about a PCD and expediency, can you give us an idea on a timeline? I mean, how long does the process take, Ms. Kitchens?
That's entirely up to the applicant. If your commission votes to recommend approval of the C2 PCD combining, that will go to council in July. If it's approved there, the applicant can submit a PCD plan for review at any point. Depending on the quality of the application submitted, it could be then scheduled relatively quickly for the next planning commission hearing.
Okay. I assume that would be agreeable to all parties.
Yes, Dwayne Keithley, Commissioner Schwartz. The timeline for us, and when I say us, I mean the tenants that want to open, is they're looking to open first quarter of 2019. So you can go backwards from there. You probably have at least 12 to 14 months of construction time. So if you back up, then you can see where we are today. We are currently getting ready to submit those plans for review. So the time for us is short. We have to move quickly in order to hit these tenant deadlines, but it is doable. And we appreciate your consideration in all this and helping us move quickly through the process.
Great, great. Mr. Hagelin, can you formulate a motion that would incorporate everything that we discussed and have agreed on?
It's just the motion and the staff recommendation on the staff report.
Okay, then can I have a motion?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Motion to adopt resolutions. Number 1, adopting a mitigated negative declaration and recommend the same to City Council. Number 2, approving the zone change from PCD Planned Commercial Development to C2 PCD Regional Commercial Planned Commercial Development Zone on 36.41 acres and recommend the same to City Council.
Can I have a second, please?
I second.
Commissioner Bell, thank you. Madam Secretary, this would be a roll call vote.
Commissioner Schwartz,
Yes?
Commissioner Lomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick.
Yes.
Thank you all. We've now approved it, and we can get started with backing up everything that we said we're going to do, and that is, everyone has a role to play. Thank you all for your flexibility on this, both the applicants and the commission, because this would really be a good project if once it's fulfilled, because the east side, has that shopping center, but it's a blight, and to really improve that and upgrade it would be a wonderful thing for this city. So that's what we're looking forward to. And my thanks to the staff, Ms. Kitchen, and all of your staff as well for their hard work and their fine efforts. I will now close the public hearing on this item, and we've got the motion approved, and so it's, I know, I've got it here. So it's time to go to communications. Ms. Kitchen, do you have any communications for us? No?
I just have one, Chairman Schwartz. One thing that's very important for the commission is to remember we want to make sure that the public process is preserved. So we want to make sure the public has the opportunity to speak on an item like what he had tonight, and that due process is maintained so that those speaking in favor of a project are able to be heard and those speaking in opposition are able to be heard. And so we have a very detailed process that we follow. One issue that's come up is commission questions, and oftentimes they come up after the public hearing is closed, like they did tonight, and the comments, the question answers become more than answers. They become additional testimony for the commission to consider when the other people don't have an opportunity to speak. Now tonight, it worked out because we had limited people in opposition, but in some projects that would not be the case. So it's important to keep in mind that we limit our questions to those and we limit the responses to those to just the answers that are being requested. And what we're trying to do is script the commission to ask any questions before the public hearing is closed, so that with keeping in mind that the commission can't express opinions before the public hearing is closed. So if you have a technical question of someone, you can ask that question before the hearing is closed, so then the opposite side has an opportunity to respond to that. Trying to limit our questions to that period as opposed to after the hearing is closed. Now, it may still come up, but if it does, we've limited that in an effort to try to keep that due process and maintain the integrity of this public process. So that's all I wanted to mention. That will be coming up in future meetings.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Hagelin. That was something that I should have clarified, because I had it in my notes, and I failed to say that, and then some people volunteered their opinion, and I thought, oops. But it is something that we'll reinforce ahead of time. And by the way, I want to also point out that, you know, with our process here, and since I've been commissioner, we've kind of changed the order slightly, allowing commissioners to ask questions in the middle and then at a later date stating their comments and their opinions on everything that they've heard. So we'll try, and maybe I will review that a little better as I become more familiar with this role as chairperson. But very good comments and noted, so I appreciate that. Okay, and by the way, I started to close the hearing, and then, but it should have been closed at a later time, slightly. Anyway, but that won't occur next week or at the next meeting.
It was fine. Everything went fine tonight on that. Thank you.
And now we have communications, and any communications from the staff? Nope. Okay, and any comments or communications that anybody on the commission wants to share? Well, in that case, this meeting is adjourned. My thanks to everyone.